knocked out by a disgruntled passenger. The FAA reporting it's received around 2,500 reports of unruly behavior by passengers since the beginning of the year. Other disturbing acts last month include a customer at a fast food restaurant in San Jose spitting on employees after being told to wear a mask.
This isn't the first time she's done it. She did it to 2 other coworkers.
And in Hawaii, a man punched in the face at a Panda Express after reminding visitors to wear masks.
People have been in lockdown pandemic mode for now over a year, and maybe some of them have forgotten how to behave in polite company.
But Santa Clara psychology professor Thomas Plant says it's important to remember there's some good amid the bad acts. For instance, when a man believed to be homeless attacked a police officer in San Francisco on Friday, bystanders rushed to help.
And Aaron, fortunately, that officer is okay, but just want to point out that there is some hard data that points out the anxiety that Americans are feeling. For instance, the American Psychological Association put out a study that shows that 61% of Americans have had undesired weight change since the pandemic began, and that this is hardly surprising. About half of parents say their stress level has gone up.
Yeah, there's no question about it. It's a PTSD for the whole country in so many ways. Dan, thank you very much. And up on next, could Republicans flip a district by tying Democrats to the defund the police movement? All eyes on one special election tonight. And a major show of force as the U.S. and its allies send Russia a very specific and strong message. And we here tonight have the exclusive video for you.
Racism doesn't have borders, and that racism can't be solved just by hopes and dreams and wishes. That we actually have to put effort and energy into it. You know, far too often we tell ourselves stories about how inequality happened that almost makes it seem like it's a car accident rather than it's unjust. Inequality is manufactured through a set of choices that we make in our society, through a set of rules. And we have the opportunity to make other choices and other rules. But that doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen without us pushing and making demands. And so the road ahead will require people of all races and all backgrounds to be willing to push on the barriers and the systems that stand in the way of change. And that means that we have to recognize that there are actually barriers in the way of change, that racism actually exists.
That's delicious. I have to taste it.
Tonight, a major test for Democrats in New Mexico's special election, where Democrat Melanie Stansbury and Republican Mark Moores are running to fill the congressional seat left by Democrat Deb Haaland. Haaland is now Biden's Interior Secretary. So Moores has centered his campaign on Stansbury's support for the BREATHE Act. Now, the BREATHE Act is a proposal drafted by Black Lives Matter activists that would divert money away from police. researcher and analyst, also the founder and director of the University of Virginia Center for Politics. So Larry, I always appreciate your perspective here. So the Democratic nominee, Melanie Sainsbury, is responding to these attacks. She says that this is a convenient political narrative that her opponent is using. She's basically trying to avoid talking about this, and there's a reason for it, right? Recent polling shows only about 20% of adults in the United States actually favor reducing funding for police and law enforcement. So when you look tonight at a race, by the way, this district went overwhelmingly for Biden. What are you looking for on overall on this issue of defunding the police and Democrats?
Well, it's always a rough equivalence, but we'll look at the actual percentages. Now, everything that we've seen so far suggests that the Democratic candidate will, in fact, win and probably win comfortably. But if we're surprised, I don't think there'll be a complete upset. But let's say the margin is single digits instead of mid-double digits where it ought to be. Then I think Democrats will say, we've got to be more careful on this issue. Maybe we should talk about police reform rather than defunding mid-double digits where it ought to be. Then I think Democrats will say...
So as you say, it's not so much whether the Democrat wins, although an upset obviously would be stunning, right? It's the margin. The margin will tell you so much. So, what does it tell you that the Republican in this race, though, is putting all bets of winning on this issue of defunding the police? Mitch McConnell today making a point saying this is the most crazy message that he's ever heard a political party try to say, as in, defund the police. What do you take away here for the midterms?
Well, they don't come up with this stuff by themselves. It's all polling, and their background polling shows that this is potentially the most powerful issue they've got in the suburbs for 2022. And remember, it was losing the suburbs that cost the Republicans the House in 2018 and cost them the election overall in 2020. So they're going to try and get suburban voters back by driving a wedge between them and Democrats on the issue of crime.
All right. Well, I really appreciate your time, as always, Larry.
Thanks, Aaron.
And we'll keep a close eye on that. As I said, the margin for Joe Biden on this district is 23 points, and Deb Haaland herself, re-election, she won by 16 points before she was nominated for Secretary of the Interior. So some of those are the numbers to keep an eye on as you watch this crucial election tonight. And up front next, exclusive video of how the U.S. and its allies are sending Russia a message from thousands of feet in the air, thousands of miles away. Take a look at this just here.
Across Africa, businesses are working together like never before. All new on CNN, Connecting Africa.
Join me, Lenny Jonas, as we crisscross the continent to show you how new connections are revolutionizing commerce in Africa. Let's start connecting Africa with the automotive sector.
It's really just a for African trade by 3% that American dollars are all new Saturday on CNN in association with Afrexim Bank. This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source. Wij zijn de eerste generatie die weet dat we de wereld aan het vernietigen zijn. We zijn ook de laatste generatie die er nog iets aan doen. Wij hebben een keuze.
We can win the biggest battles in the smallest moments. For the world or against it.
actually are vegans. Maybe if we didn't.
CNN.
Tonight, a show of force. The U.S. and NATO allies flying bombers over all 30 NATO countries in a joint operation intended to send a message to Russian President Vladimir Putin amid rising tensions. Nick Robertson is out front, and this is his exclusive report.
27,000 feet over Scotland. Flying at 275 knots with British fighter jets for company. A US Air Force B-52 long-range Stratofortress bomber refueling on a flight from Spain before returning to a NATO mission, Operation Allied Sky, taking aircraft within sight of Russia.
It's on a large-scale NATO mission involving more than 20 NATO members flying over NATO states. And in part, it's a message to Russian President Vladimir Putin.
2 weeks ahead of President Biden's summit with Vladimir Putin, it's a timely statement of the steel backing Biden's diplomacy and puts NATO wings in the skies close to where a Belarus fighter jet forced a civilian passenger plane to land, arresting a Belarusian dissident and his Russian girlfriend, raising tensions.
I'll be meeting with President Putin in a couple weeks in Geneva, making it clear that we will not stand by and let him abuse those rights.
The US Air Force KC-135 Stratotanker took off from southern England half an hour ahead of the refuel. Both tanker and bomber, Cold War-era aircraft, older than their aircrew, but with East-West tensions climbing, just as relevant as when they were built.
It is interesting. I mean, all the generations of pilots that have been able to fly it, and it's updating every once in a while, but she's reliable, and it's working. So no real need to change a whole lot.
The mission, according to NATO commanders, intended to demonstrate what they call credibility of common defence and enhanced readiness. For Captain Todd Berglund, a 6-year tanker veteran, and his crew, this day, like all others in a Stratotanker, nothing left to chance.
We have to be at a certain place on time, with the right amount of gas all the time, so a little bit more pressure, but we do it so often, it's just it kind of becomes a habit pattern, and that's our profession, so it's just what we do.
How much big NATO missions like this faze Putin is hard to measure. In a few weeks in Geneva, when they meet, Biden will be able to judge. Nick Robertson, CNN, somewhere over the UK.
Just fantastic, incredible welcome. That's just what we do. Well, thanks very much for joining us. AC360 starts now.
And good evening. We begin tonight with what President Biden is calling a threat to American democracy. Yesterday, the president said democracy itself is in peril, and today in Tulsa, Oklahoma, marking the 100th anniversary of the Greenwood Race Massacre, he spoke out against the state-by-state effort by Republicans across the country to enact restrictive voting laws.
This circuit right is under assault with an incredible intensity like I've never seen, even though I got started as a public defender in the civil rights movement. With an intensity and aggressiveness we've not seen in a long, long time.